So I have made my way to a place that I wanted to visit for years. And the reason why I haven't come here earlier is because I wanted some very specific weather conditions. And that is exactly what I'm getting today. Because we have a big storm hitting Denmark with like hurricane wind gusts. And it's all wind that comes from the Eastern Sea, the Baltic Sea. And I'm walking here in this little forest area on my way out to my shooting location. And honestly, I'm not sure how much you can hear because the wind in the trees is just so loud. So I have come down to some of the only cliffs that we have here in Denmark, and they are called Stevns Klint. It's actually a UNESCO heritage site because the part of the cliff that is exposed here is as old as the dinosaurs. So the cliffs that we see here are like 65 million years old, which is quite fascinating to think about. So I have finally made it here, and the reason why it has taken so long, because I wanted to go here for years, is that I needed the water to fill up down here so that you cannot see the beach, because in my humble opinion it's a little bit boring with the beach there. And if I can combine that with the storm surge as we have today, where the water is at the very least 1.5 meters above average, plus having the storm push all the water in towards the cliffs, we can get these super dramatic scenes that you usually do not see in Denmark. And when I say we're having a storm surge, according to the Danish Meteorological Institute and all the media and all that stuff, this here is supposedly one of the worst storms that we have had in 120 years. Not so much that we are getting hurricane gusts, but the main thing is that it comes from the east, which means that it's a place where we don't have a whole lot of ocean and sea protection in Denmark. So over the past 2 weeks we have had a lot of wind from the west that has pushed all the water into the Baltic Sea from the North Sea. And now that the wind has changed and we get this huge storm, all that extra water is getting pushed up towards the eastern shores of Denmark. So the water level is like 1.5 to 2 meters above average, which doesn't sound like a whole lot if you come from any other country than Denmark. But when you are in a country where these cliffs, as you see here, are some of the tallest cliffs we have along the sea, where we usually just have like a beach, then it is actually quite problematic for a lot of people who live along the coast. So there will be a lot of water damage and a lot of flooding on the Danish east coasts, especially in the Danish southeast coasts today. So when it comes to the composition, there is quite a decent amount to work with right here. So obviously, because it's the coastline, I can use the coastline as a leading line leading in to my focal point, my subject, which is the small church, and then basically just wait until the waves look cool. So what happens is that often the waves come in and then they like hit the cliffs here, which makes a lot of like sea spray, which looks cool. And sometimes then the waves come back out again and hit the next wave. So they kind of like explode right here. I will try to photograph both these phenomenons. And to not have the church too small in the frame, I'm not going to go too wide right here. But if I don't go wide enough, then I can't use the foreground right here. So what I found is that there's kind of this little hole right here in the grass that I try to incorporate in a way where you can still see the waves down here and make it a leading line with some out of focus foreground leading into the church. Whoa, the gusts here are crazy. In that way I can hopefully still get moody clouds in the background, the church fairly large so that it doesn't become too small in the photo, and then have kind of like a leading line leading into it with a foreground where I avoid having too much dead space from the ocean right here. Sometimes there are some streaks forming on the ocean. I may also try to photograph those. However, right now I'm in that lucky position that it haven't really started raining a whole lot yet. It's supposed to, So it seems as if I have a decent amount of time to just walk a little bit around and experiment with a few different things, and then come up with a composition that I think works.
So in the curation process of these photos, I dropped the idea with the little hole in the grass in vertical mode because it just didn't work. The grass took up too much attention and covered the cliffs and waves. However, I used the grass like this, so I simply just have a leading line throughout the photo. I also really like this photo here. The church is a little bit smaller in the frame. There's a bit more context. And I really like those stripes, those streaks of foam in the water. And of course, the birds in the sky. So if you want to know more about how I compose my photos, be sure to get my 2 ebooks on exactly that topic. Minimal text, loads of examples, so they are super easy to understand and you get to the point fast so you actually learn something. There are links to both of them down in the description of the video. And of course, as always, a big thank you to all of you who have already got them.
So I'm trying to avoid too much wind right here by holding the microphone here. Hopefully that helps a little bit. So it's quite funny to photograph this place here in Denmark, because when I compare seascapes and cliffs and all that stuff to many of the other places that I photographed around the world, this one here can seem a little bit underwhelming. Now the cliffs are fine. There's not a whole lot of places in the entire world where you can find like a lone church situated or balancing on a cliff's edge and then actually having the waves come in here. The only issue is that even though we have such extreme weather today, extreme for Denmark, it is still relatively underwhelming when you compare to like Iceland or the Faroe Islands. So it is cool, but looking down on the waves, they do look a little bit small, even though they are actually quite big. So I'm not entirely sure how the photos will turn out. And obviously each time I'm filming, I'm losing like opportunities for getting the biggest wave of the day. And then I get super distracted when I'm standing here. But I do think I can come away with something cool. I'm just not sure it is like, you know, spectacular. But nevertheless, the idea holds up. I'm just not sure that. And I even put the tripod further down so it wouldn't fall over. Anyway, back to photography. So I've been here for a few hours by now, and the wind has really picked up, and so has the waves. It was as if like from 1 minute to the next, it was just like dialed up by double, and the waves are just even more crazy now, and they come much more frequently, much bigger. But it's also getting to a point where it's quite uncomfortable to just be here, because I don't know if you can see it through this video, but I'm getting pummeled and I'm like sitting down on the other side of the cliff, so I'm not getting like super exposed to the gusts, but I guess that's what they meant when they said hurricane gusts. But yeah, it's still quite fun. It is getting a little bit cold and I am losing the light, so I think I'm getting to a point where probably about time to head home, but it's getting really good now. As you can see, some of these waves in here, like there was just one that literally came up and just so sprayed into the forest, and that is like the largest wave I think I've seen today. And you can see out here, like obviously this is not like, you know, Atlantic waves or Pacific waves. For a little Dane like me, this here is actually quite impressive in Denmark.
So I do think that this last photo here is my favorite of the day. I really like that big wave right there. However, I also really like the first one and the foreground waves with those streaks, and the clouds are probably also my favorites in the first one. So I can of course just composite them together if I wanted to. I do fear that the photo is a little bit context heavy, in the sense that you need to know what's actually in the photo to appreciate it, so that you are actually looking at a UNESCO heritage site. You're literally looking at part of Earth's crust, where the layer that shows the mass extinction of the dinosaurs is revealed. That these are some of the only cliffs that we have in Denmark, and that a storm like this may not look super big on the photo, but in the Danish context, it is a massive storm. It actually turned out to be a 100-year event. So the storm surge we had right here is actually something special. So let me hear down in the comments, do you like it? Don't you like it? I don't know. If you want to learn how I edit my photos and maybe even composite these two photos together to make one photo that I really like, be sure to enroll in my big Photoshop for landscape photographers post-processing course. I've made it so it's easy for beginners to get started, and even if you're used to Lightroom, you can basically just jump in and start to learn about Photoshop and all the benefits that comes with that. There is a link down in the description and a coupon code to save $45. Be sure to subscribe, like, and again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. See you next time.